Sacred Blood Beast Soul Aura, Sacred Blood Beast Soul Add-on, Sacred Blood Shape-Shifting Beast Soul, Sacred Blood Beast Soul Weapon, Sacred Blood Wings. Zhong Zhenhong could not help reading the Beast Soul list out loud. His voice became more grim every time he finished reading one. Even his hand holding the document was shaking. He knew very well what these Beast Souls meant. Although humans had developed in God's sanctuary for almost 2 decades, and there were more and more who could kill a sacred blood creature, it did not mean it was an easy thing to hunt sacred blood creatures. More than 90% of humans could never hunt a sacred blood creature, let alone gain a sacred blood beast soul. However, the beast souls listed in this document were almost all the most outstanding sacred blood beast souls, especially the sacred blood beast soul aura, which was the blessing of any team. Other beast souls were also highly coveted. Although all Zhong Zhenhong saw were names on the list, they were enough to make him feel shocked. So many top-notch sacred blood beast souls all belonged to the same person. He could not imagine who this person must be. Even if he was the descendant of some impressive figure, it was still very hard to collect all these beast souls. If these sacred blood beast souls were used on a special squad, Zhong Zhenhong could imagine how awesome the special squad would become. It would be much easier for them to hunt sacred blood creatures in the future. In Zhong Zhenhong's eyes, these top-notch sacred blood beast souls could be used to make an elite team. If Zhong Zhenhong were to learn that all he had seen was only a part of the beast souls Han Sen owned, while the rest were sold to Lin Beifeng and Su Xiaoqiao, his chin might even fall to the floor. Zhong Zhenhong quickly turned the document to the last page, because he could not wait to see who it was to own all these sacred blood beast souls. He could not believe that someone like this was in the special squad, and he could not put a finger on someone immediately. Normally speaking, those who worked for the special squad would not be the descendant of a celebrity. People with prominent backgrounds would more likely be those who enjoyed the protection from the special squad and never needed to protect anyone else. Therefore, Zhong Zhenhong could not imagine who would have such impressive collection in the special squad.
Han Sen.
Seeing this name, Zhong Zhenhong couldn't help feeling dazed. Director, do you want to speak to him? He is still waiting for a reply. Seeing that Zhong Zhenhong had finished reading, Jiang Sheng followed up. Of course. These beast souls are crucial to us, and we must have them. What are his requests? Zhong Zhenhong said seriously. He is asking for a quota for his sister to be protected starting from the moment she entered God's sanctuary. In addition, he had asked us to send sacred blood beast souls of 4 specific types to his sister as soon as possible after she entered God's sanctuary. Jiang Sheng explained Han Sen's request in details. After hearing that, Zhong Zhenhong pondered and then said, with Han Sen's background, I am surprised that he is able to earn such a fortune. Contact him and agree to what he asked. Prepare a contract and sign it as soon as possible. Because of Qin Xian, Zhong Zhenhong had paid attention to Han Sen before. However, previously he was still doubtful about Han Sen's ability, especially when Han Sen disappeared in God's sanctuary for a long while, which made Zhong Zhenhong quite disappointed in him. However, after seeing the beast souls of Han Sen, Zhong Zhenhong found that he had given Han Sen too little credit. The man discovered by Lady Qin was indeed extraordinary. It seems that Han Sen is indeed a rare talent. I wonder where he would end up after entering Second God's sanctuary. I hope that he could return to the special squad as soon as possible, because it would be such a waste for a talent like this to be wandering around. Zhong Zhenhong made a note in his comlink and wrote down Han Sen's name, which meant he would pay special attention to Han Sen. Han Sen did not sell most of his beast souls, but used them to purchase an insurance for his sister, helping her grow fast. In Han Sen's eyes, there was nothing in the world more important than the safety of his family, so the beast souls were quite well spent. In addition, the 4 types of beast souls he requested for his sister would be immensely helpful when she was about to kill a super creature, so it was a good deal after all. However, Han Sen did not know where he would be assigned in Second God's sanctuary, so it was impossible for him to trade his beast souls for some beast souls of Second God's sanctuary. He had to arrange for that after she evolved. But Han Sen had no use of mediocre beast souls. Although he traded away most of his sacred blood beast souls, he still had all the super beast souls and the sacred blood beast souls that were indispensable to him. Currently, Han Sen had 7 super beast souls in total. They were Water Reaper, Cursed Wolf, Bloody Slayer, Golden Growler, Golden Rock Worm King, Holy Angel, and Desert Bird. The Sacred Blood beast souls would not be that useful in Second God's Sanctuary, so Han Sen traded most of them away, only keeping Beetle Knight, Fairy Queen, and Meowth. Initially, Han Sen also wanted to keep Purple Feathered Dragon and Color Shifter. However, after looking through the information about Second God's Sanctuary, Han Sen found that there were a lot of flying creatures in Second God's Sanctuary, many of which had much higher speed than the wings he had currently. Therefore, the Sacred Blood wings were not that valuable anymore. In addition, he had 2 super pets which could both fly. He could totally do without the beast soul wings. Color Shifter was not that useful in Second God's Sanctuary either. If he was to hide himself, changing the color alone was no longer enough in Second God's Sanctuary, where there were many creatures that had very strong sense of smell and perception. They could probably sense his body temperature. In the end, Han Sen gave up the Color Shifter as well. Keeping Meowth was simply for sentimental reasons. He had really considered Meowth as his own pet. The doppelganger that the Beetle Knight could turn into would still be very useful in Second God's Sanctuary, so he decided to keep it as well. As for the Fairy Queen, it was not easy to find a humanoid shape-shifting beast soul like that, not even in Second God's Sanctuary. In addition, it was Han Sen's reward of the contest, so he kept it as well. At this point, Han Sen was still faced with one difficult problem. Without solving that problem, he could not evolve with a peaceful mind. The problem was not Zero, of course. Although Zero was also a problem, Han Sen believed he should be able to get rid of her after he evolved to Second God's Sanctuary, which was why he was not that worried about it. The thing worried Han Sen the most was the Black Crystal. It could even feed and help creatures evolve. If he could continue to use such a treasure in Second God's Sanctuary, it would be very helpful to his cultivation. If he was able to farm a super creature in Second God's Sanctuary, or even just a few of Sacred Blood creatures, he would become strong much faster. If he was able to get some beast souls out of it, it would be even better. The only issue was that Han Sen was not able to take back Crystal out of God's Sanctuary. It was part of the rules of God's Sanctuary. Except for beast souls, nothing in God's Sanctuary could be brought out. Han Sen had tried for a lot of times, and unfortunately, the same rule applied to the Black Crystal. If Han Sen could not take the Black Crystal out, then the Black Crystal could only be kept in his room in Steel Armor Shelter. However, after Han Sen evolved, once he teleported out of God's Sanctuary, he would appear in Second God's Sanctuary the next time he teleported back. In other words, First God's Sanctuary would have nothing to do with him, and the room at Steel Armor Shelter would no longer belong to him. There was no way Han Sen would let go of such a treasure. Watching the archer crow that had just become a Sacred Blood creature, Han Sen kept thinking. If he were to take away the Black Crystal, Han Sen could only think of one possibility, which was to swallow it, like eating the meat or life essence. Although he might not succeed, that was the only way left. However, Han Sen was not sure whether the Black Crystal would harm his body after he swallowed it. Although it was beneficial to creatures, it did not mean it was the same case for humans. The plants in God's Sanctuary were the same way. Eating those plants might be helpful to super creatures like the turtle, but it might have strong side effects on humans. If one were to try the plants out, one would very likely die from them. Even if something was not harmful in the first place, there could be too much of a good thing. The Black Crystal could make a super creature easily, which meant it had immense energy inside. Han Sen's body was not strong enough at the moment, so if the energy of the Black Crystal exploded after he swallowed it, maybe he would die as well. It was impossible for him to give it up, while the only possible method was very risky. Even Han Sen was usually quite decisive. He became hesitant this time. Han Sen looked at the archer crow. There was no need for him to wait for the bird to evolve into a super creature anymore. It would be pointless for him to do that, and he did not have time for waiting either. Han Sen killed the Sacred Blood archer crow and cooked it. After eating the creature, he had filled up the last 3 Sacred Geno points, maxing out on his Sacred Geno points as well. Ordinary, Primitive, Mutant, Sacred Blood, Super. All 5 types of Geno points were eventually maxed out. He might be the first person in human history who had maxed out on all the Geno points for real. Han Sen could clearly feel the immense power in his body. He was certain that all aspects of his fitness were over 30. Once he evolved in the evolution pool, his fitness would have another leap. Should I eat it or not? Han Sen took the black crystal in his hand, unable to decide. After a long while, Han Sen still put the black crystal away. Even if he were to eat it, he would do that after he revolved. At least he would be much stronger and more capable to cope with any accident. There was a detailed description of evolution process on the Skynet. The process itself was basically risk-free, so Han Sen was not really worried. He wanted to finish evolution before registering at Daphne so that he could become a sacred blood aristocrat in the Alliance immediately, which would give him a lot of benefits the commoners did not have. These days, Han Sen had been searching for more information about Shura on the Skynet. According to the research in the Alliance, it was not only difficult for Shura to survive in God's sanctuary, they could not gain geno points like human either. Even after eating the meat of creatures, their bodies would not become stronger like human. In addition, Shura could not use a beast soul either. If Shura wanted to enhance their fitness, they could only do so by practicing Shura martial art, and there was no other way. However, human could use God's sanctuary to improve their genes. In that aspect, Zero was similar to Shura because she had no interest in life essence. However, judging by Zero's appearance, she was 100% human. Han Sen regarded her and could not see Shura in her. Forget about it. After I enter second God's sanctuary, I will no longer see her, so whatever. Han Sen walked out of his room and entered the Evolution Palace in Steel Armor Shelter. In the Evolution Palace that looked like an ancient temple, there was a deep rectangular pond located in the center of the palace. A mysterious statue of Beast Head was guarding the pool from each corner, spouting liquid that was almost transparent from their mouths. Without hesitation, Han Sen took off all of his clothes and walked into the pool, immersing his body in the lukewarm liquid in the evolution pool. In the liquid, Han Sen felt he had become an embryo. He felt like an unborn baby, all of his body cells developing joyfully, bringing him to a rebirth. The feeling was hard to describe. There was no heat or coldness, and no stimulations. The growth was so natural that it felt a part of his own growth. It felt like puberty again, but it was not a real puberty. The growth was inside out. In the liquid, he did not feel suffocated at all, but extremely comfortable. The newborn strength grew in his muscles, bones, veins, and cells, making him feel like he could destroy the whole world with just one punch. Han Sen understood that it was a hallucination brought by the rapid growth of strength. However, the feeling was fascinating. All of his spores were open. The waste and dirt seemed to have left his body, making Han Sen feel more and more light and relaxed. The impurities of his body fell deep down the pool. Han Sen felt like he was a sacred soul that had reborn with all his sins purified. The feeling was so wonderful that Han Sen almost moaned out loud. No wonder so many people are pursuing evolution of the body. The feeling of evolution is magnificent. It is almost like a rebirth, making the old body shine with youth again.
Han Sen tweaked.
However, he knew it was not finished yet. He had to wait until he heard the voice, which would tell him this evolution was successful. In addition, Han Sen wanted to enjoy this fantastic feeling for a while longer. It was as good as having sex with the woman he loved, but it was a completely different feeling. It was more like a person who had been sick for a long time was suddenly cured. All the pains and sickness went away in a moment. The cleanse was so thorough that one might even cry. Han Sen did not cry, but he totally enjoyed it. Evolution successful. Status of Evolver gained. 100 years added to lifespan. Super Body King Spirit gained.
Han Sen.
Super Body, King Spirit. Status, Evolver. Lifespan, 300. Requirement for next revolution, 100 Geno points. Geno points gained, 0. Han Sen was dumbstruck by the two words, King Spirit. There were many Evolvers among humans. In fact, the majority of humans were Evolvers. Unevolved persons were usually between 16 and 30 years old, while the majority of humans between 20 to 300 years old were Evolvers. Most people would stay in this status their whole life, and only a few could become Surpasser. It was not because average Evolvers could not gain 100 Geno points, but because Third God's Sanctuary was too dangerous. If one's fitness index was too low, it was very likely for one to die in Third God's Sanctuary. There had been so many lessons that most people would rather stay in Second God's Sanctuary all their life, which made evolvers the majority among human. There were hundreds, or even thousands of billions of revolvers. However, among all of them, including those who had evolved with their sacred geno points maxed out, Han Sen had never heard their gained body had a name. An evolver with mutant geno points maxed out would gain a mutant body, while an evolver with sacred geno points maxed out would gain a sacred body. There was no other name to it. However, after Han Sen's super body, there was a name, which was King Spirit. The two words made Han Sen feel surprised and excited, not knowing what it meant. He checked the introduction of super body King Spirit, which was so concise that it was just one sentence. King Spirit. King rules the world. All spirits shall bow. The simple sentence suddenly made Han Sen change his look, because he thought of many things all of a sudden. Second God's Sanctuary was vastly different from the first. There were no natural human shelters for humans to rest inside. There was nothing around the teleport devices. Other than that, humans needed to fight on their own for everything. Creatures in Second God's Sanctuary were more organized than in the first, and there were many spirit shelters ruled by spirits. Spirits were different from creatures. Most of them looked similar to humans. They could be male or female, but their body was not made of flesh. Unless their spirit stones were destroyed, they were basically immortal. As long as the spirit stones were there, a spirit could always be reborn in the spirit stone even if he or she was killed. In addition, spirits had the ability to control creatures. As long as there was a spirit shelter, most of the creatures in the region would be attached to the spirit and form a creature troop. Of course, advanced creatures would not be controlled by less advanced spirits. The status and ability of spirits determined their ability to control creatures. Under the control of spirits, there had been many incidents of creatures attacking human shelters. If humans were not strong enough, it was normal for them to be killed in Second God's Sanctuary. One must truly kill a spirit by going into the spirit shelter and crushing the spirit stone. Of course, one could also take ownership of the spirit stone and gain the allegiance of spirits. However, spirits rarely showed obedience to humans. The more advanced the spirits were, the harder it would be for humans to gain their allegiance. Most of the spirits would rather detonate their own spirit stones before they bowed to humans. Therefore, not a lot of people had spirits in Second God's Sanctuary. Spirits were different from beast souls. Beast souls were merely tools that needed to be controlled by humans. However, spirits had their own thoughts and intelligence and could fulfill tasks on their own. In addition, the spirits that had shown allegiance to humans would lose the ability to control creatures while gain the ability to use beast souls like humans. In addition, once the spirits swore allegiance, their life and death would be determined by their masters. Many humans thought of the ownership of spirits something to brag about and something to symbolize their social status. If the spirit in King Spirit referred to the same spirit, did it mean Han Sen could ask any spirit to give him allegiance? That would be an incredible ability. However, it was just Han Sen's own guess. He still had no idea whether it was true. He had to find out when he went to Second God's Sanctuary and saw a spirit. Although Han Sen was happy, he was not too excited because he was still worried about the black crystal. Han Sen wanted to teleport to the Alliance right away to test his current fitness. However, before solving the issue of the black crystal, he could not go out yet. After leaving the evolution pool, Han Sen felt the air seemed to have become heavy. The impurities started to enter his body like dusts. Han Sen suddenly understood why evolvers could not stay in First God's Sanctuary for long. After the evolution, one's body became so pure like spring water. The longer an evolver stayed in First God's Sanctuary, the more impurities would enter his body, making his body more and more dirty. If the impurities were a small amount, his body could reject them. However, if an evolver stayed too long, his pure body could never be recovered. Han Sen was unwilling to stay in First God's Sanctuary for too long. He had finished all the business he should attend to. At this point, he had only one last thing to do. After returning to his room, Han Sen held the black crystal in his hand. After a long while, he gritted his teeth and put the black crystal into his mouth. Han Sen was standing in the teleport device. Once anything happened, he would teleport immediately back to the Alliance. Since Qin Xian was the station master of the teleport station, he would seek her help immediately. There was a medical team in the teleport station who might be able to save him. Of course, that was the worst-case scenario. Even if someone found out about the black crystal, it would still be better than death. However, the scenarios Han Sen was imagining did not happen. He swallowed the black crystal as if he had swallowed an ordinary stone, feeding nothing. There was no heat or coolness or swelling. It was almost like the black crystal had no use at all. Han Sen did not dare to be careless. There were many radioactive minerals in the universe that might affect the functions of one's body in the long run. One might get severely sick or even die. Han Sen took a deep breath and looked around in the room. Making sure that he had nothing left except for Zero, Han Sen smiled to Zero, who was regarding him with wide eyes, and teleported out of steel armor shelter. Zero followed Han Sen out, but Han Sen paid her no mind. He ran to the self-service scanner at the teleport station, swiped the card for a scan, and then scanned his own body. After seeing the holographic image in the scanner, Han Sen was dazed. He scanned a couple times more, and the result was the same. There was no black crystal in his body. Maybe I still failed to bring the black crystal with me? Han Sen became extremely disappointed. In the past, many people teleported immediately after swallowing the meat of an entire creature, wishing to bring the meat to the Alliance. However, although they were teleported back to the Alliance, the undigested meat was still left in the shelter. Han Sen thought the black crystal was also left in his own room at Steel Armor Shelter. However, Han Sen immediately felt something was wrong. He had been paying attention to his own body and did not look at his mind. Feeling disappointed, he no longer paid special attention to his body and felt something unusual in his mind. Han Sen looked to his mind and saw the cursed wolf, golden growler, holy angel, and other super beast souls were sitting in a circle, staring at one thing greedily with fierce looks. Meowth and Beetle Knight were standing afar, clearly coveting the item as well. However, they were afraid of the 7 super beast souls and did not dare to come any closer. Han Sen's eyes fell on the item in the center of the super beast souls and became overjoyed. The black crystal, which he failed to find in his own body, had somehow entered his mind and hovering there. What the beast souls were eyeing was exactly the black crystal. How did this end up in my mind? Can I still take it out? Han Sen focused his mind on the black crystal, but it did not move at all. Obviously, it was not like a beast soul which would respond to Han Sen's thought.
Han Sen frov ned slightly.
Since the black crystal could not be moved at his thought, it would be difficult to get it out. Glancing at the beast souls that were trying to take the black crystal for themselves, Han Sen suddenly thought, maybe this black crystal could be fed to not only creatures, but also beast souls. Han Sen looked around and found that he had sold most of his beast souls, except for the super beast souls, Meowth, and Beetle Knight, as well as a few primitive beast souls that he did not manage to sell. Those primitive beast souls were shivering far away from the crystal, unable to bear the horrendous aura of the super beast souls. If they could, they probably would have wet themselves already. Han Sen controlled a primitive copper-toothed beast to walk toward the black crystal. The primitive beast soul looked incredulous and surprised. However, it was quivering under the glare of the super beast souls. Even the super beast souls could not disobey Han Sen's order. They had to watch the primitive beast walking toward the black crystal. Han Sen was simply testing on the copper-toothed beast to see if the black crystal could be fed to beast souls the same way it was fed to creatures. Once Han Sen made sure there was no risks, he would then feed the black crystal to the advanced beast souls. As the copper beast was walking toward the black crystal in fear, a figure suddenly moved on its own, grabbing the black crystal before the primitive beast. It was the holy angel.
Han Sen frov ned.
Ever since the holy angel swallowed the meat of the golden growler, she became somewhat different. Sometimes she would act voluntarily, although it was still within certain boundaries. Han Sen initially wanted to order the holy angel to let go of the black crystal, but hesitated as the holy angel looked at him expectantly with puppy eyes, yearning for the black crystal. Thinking of the fact that the holy angel could further evolve, Han Sen decided to let her have it. Since she wanted it so much, it should not be harmful to her. With Han Sen's order, Holy Angel became overjoyed and swallowed the black crystal in her hand. Han Sen was dazed. If he knew this was an option, there was no need for him to take the risks and swallow the black crystal. He could have fed it to one of his beast souls. Indeed, I am still too young. In the future I must think twice before I act.
Han Sen kritiserade himself inwardly.
Luckily, nothing went wrong this time. After the holy angel swallowed the black crystal, she suddenly huddled up, her body glistening with holy aura as if she were in heaven. The aura quickly turned into a gigantic cocoon of light, hugging the holy angel. And then everything became calm again. The cocoon of light was hovering in Han Sen's mind, throbbing with a special rhythm of life. All the other beast souls became disappointed and scattered. The most disappointed among them was the copper-toothed beast. Han Sen looked at the cocoon of light, which did not seem to be changing anymore. Han Sen decided not to pay attention to his mind for a while. I wonder what the holy angel would become after another evolution. Han Sen felt expectant and excited. The black crystal could be fed only to the creatures, but also the beast souls. If the black crystal could make primitive beast souls turn into sacred blood beast souls, and even super beast souls, then its ability was simply appalling. Although Han Sen was strong in fitness, it will still take him some time before he could kill a sacred blood creature in Second God's Sanctuary. It was certain that the sacred blood creatures in Second God's Sanctuary all had a fitness level above 100. As for the super creatures in Second God's Sanctuary, since no one had ever killed one so far, Han Sen had no idea how strong they were. If the black crystal could be fed to beast souls of Second God's Sanctuary and turn them into super beast souls, then Han Sen would not suffer as much on his way to hunt super creatures in Second God's Sanctuary. However, it was just Han Sen's own wish. He did not know how effective the black crystal was yet. After going out of the scanning device, Han Sen looked at Zero, who was waiting for him outside, and thought, "This time I enter God's Sanctuary again, I will appear in Second God's Sanctuary, so there would be no way for you to follow me anymore." In order to get rid of Zero, Han Sen directly walked toward the teleport device, took a deep breath, and chose to teleport. This was his first time to enter Second God's Sanctuary, so the location he would be teleported to was random. Han Sen was praying that he would be sent to somewhere ruled by humans, which would be much more conducive to his cultivation. If unfortunately, he was sent to a place where there were all creatures with no human, or where there was a large spirit shelter, it would be difficult for him to even survive. Whichever God is listening, please give me blessings to end up in a nice spot. Han Sen was praying to all the gods in the world before he started the teleport device. After a temporary lightheadedness, Han Sen was no longer in the teleport device. What he saw was a huge ice cave. The ice around him was as tough as glass, probably having been frozen for centuries. Ice cones and columns were hanging from the ceiling of the ice cave. There was nothing but coldness, except for the teleport device under Han Sen's feet. What is this damned place? Han Sen looked around and only saw one hole leading to the outside. He wondered what was outside. It was impossible for human to build a shelter in such a place. Even if there were humans, it was highly unlikely they would live in this cave. Han Sen still had hope and wanted to crawl out of the hole to have a look. Before Han Sen acted, he suddenly saw a blur in the teleport device, and someone else appeared there. Han Sen looked at the person and became surprised. The gorgeous figure of Zero appeared in the teleport device.
No.
It is impossible that she's an evolver. How can she end up here? Even if she was an evolver, it is highly unlikely for her to end up at the same spot as me. The chance is so slim, and there must be something wrong. Han Sen was lost, gazing at Zero. Han Sen believed there were only two possibilities. One was that Zero was abnormal. The other was that his 9-life cat pendant was problematic. Otherwise, how could Zero end up here? Zero still acted the same way, standing next to Han Sen like a shadow, her eyes blinking from time to time. "Okay, you win," Han Sen said with a wry smile, knowing that his beautiful wish to get rid of Zero was wasted. In fact, Han Sen did not really dislike Zero after spending some time with her. She was someone hard to hate. With a sweet face, She rarely spoke or did anything annoying despite being a tag-along. Han Sen even felt accustomed to her existence. It was just her weird background that made Han Sen feel reluctant to accept her. However, when he thought about it, Zero had never harmed him. In addition, Zero would probably be a huge help to Han Sen. With her ability, she could probably even fight sacred blood creatures in Second God's Sanctuary. Such a strong and obedient fighter was definitely a great assistance to Han Sen, who had just entered Second God's Sanctuary. I have a fitness around 60 or 70, so it would be easy for me to break 100 if I gained some Geno points. At that time, I would be able to match Zero's ability, and then it would no longer be an issue for me to keep her around. Han Sen thought about it, decided to let it go, and crawled out of the hole. The hole led to a path that was quite twisted. Han Sen and Zero walked for a long while before they saw the light. The moment he saw what was outside, Han Sen was dazed. All he could see was icebergs and peaks covered in snow. It was also snowing heavily. The world was all white. On the top of the largest mountain, he could see a white fairy tale-like castle vaguely through the flying snowflakes. Because the snow was too heavy, he could barely see the details of the architecture. However, he could still feel how dedicated and beautiful it was in the silver storm. Han Sen's face suddenly became grim. Although he could not see any details, it was not a building made by man. Otherwise, there would be some modern materials and practical designs, which the castle did not have. Spirit shelter. Han Sen suddenly had an idea, which was not good news to him. Since Han Sen had not spotted a human building but saw a spirit shelter, it was unlikely for him to meet any fellow man. Judging from the looks of the castle, it was probably owned by advanced spirits. If the spirits were too strong and had a large troop of creatures, Han Sen believed he would suffer in his early development. "Why are you standing there?" A hasty but low voice sounded from Han Sen's back. Han Sen turned to look and saw a man with his full body covered in Arctic suit waving at them from the depths of the hole. Han Sen suddenly felt a bit pleased to finally see a human. He took Zero to walk over to the guy. When he was ready to speak, the guy suddenly pulled them inside the ice channel. Before Han Sen even said anything, the guy looked them up and down and said, "You must be new here." "We just teleported over today," Han Sen answered and checked the guy out. The guy was over 20, this should be less than 30. He looked quite handsome, but there was a deep exhaustion and helplessness on his face. "Then you have terrible luck. It would be very hard for you in the future," the guy smiled wryly and said. "Let's go. Let's talk inside so that we don't alarm the ice-armored beasts. They have sensitive ears and could hear a voice 1,000 feet away in snowstorm. My name is Suyu, and I came here more than a year ago, so I have more experience than you. Here's a piece of advice. Do not wander around." The guy was quite easygoing, talking to Han Sen and Zero as he walked. "Brother, what is this place? Is there a human shelter?"
Han Sen asked.
Suyu curled his lips and said, "A human shelter can never be built under such circumstances. Even one could be built, it would be useless because of the spirit shelter in the mountains. It is a shelter of an aristocrat spirit. In addition to aristocrat spirit, there were a dozen mutant creatures and hundreds of primitive ice-armored beasts. Let me put it this way, all the humans here combined would not be an adequate meal for those guys. Is there no evolver with fitness index above 100?
Han Sen asked.
Like creatures, there were 4 levels of spirits: squire, knight, aristocrats, and royalty, which could be king or queen. The 4 levels corresponded to ordinary, primitive, mutant, and sacred blood creatures. An aristocrat spirit was about as strong as a mutant creature. However, because spirits had higher intelligence and the ability to control creatures, they were greater than mutant creatures. How could we ever reach 100 in such a shithole? Only 7 or 8 guys would be assigned here randomly all year round. Because we are so close to the spirit shelter, we have to travel far to hunt any creatures so that we don't rattle those guys in the spirit shelter. In addition, the creatures nearby were extremely lacking, so we might not even be able to find a creature that falls behind in days. It is difficult to kill even an ordinary creature, so how could we have enough Geno points to strengthen our fitness?" Suyu whined. Apparently, even the strongest evolver among us only had a fitness level of a little more than 60. The good thing is that we stick together. Because we help each other, we are able to hunt some creatures. However, it is not likely that we can make any significant achievements. This damn place is hell. Whoever sent here are just down in luck. Haven't you thought about leaving here?
Han Sen asked.
How do you propose to leave? This place faces the ocean in 3 directions. Only the direction of the spirit shelter leads to land. Besides, we don't even know where we are. Even if we bypass the spirit shelter, it would be hard for us to locate a human shelter. We would be more than likely to die on the way. Suyu paused and said, "Don't get ahead of yourself and don't rush anything. Wait here for a couple of days. When more people arrived, we would be able to go farther to hunt. People here are nice, so as long as you do your part, the meat would be shared to you. So stay and gain some Geno points, know this place better, and then consider hunting on your own." "Thank you so much for the instructions, friend." Han Sen thanked Suyu for being so straightforward. "Call me Suyu," Suyu smiled and said. After going back to the ice cave, Han Sen chatted some more with Suyu and got the basic idea about the place. Then he teleported back to the Alliance together with Zero. Han Sen decided to get certified as a Sacred Blood Aristocrat. In addition to all the benefits he could get, he would be able to let his sister continue her study at the posh school with confidence. Before getting certified as a Sacred Blood Aristocrat, Han Sen first needed to make arrangements for Zero. It was almost impossible for him to get rid of her at this point, so he must consider how to deal with the issue. Because Zero did not have any legal status, it would be hard for him to put her in the hotel. Han Sen hesitated and decided he had to take her home. It was impossible for him to avoid going home forever. After spending more time with her, Han Sen was certain that Zero had no trouble in intelligence, nor was she a lunatic or idiot. In addition, she seemed to be quite smart, just did not know much about how to interact with people, which made her look odd. Before taking Zero home, Han Sen took her to the testing hall. He planned to do a simple strength test himself and ask Zero to take the test to determine how strong she was. It was easy to do a strength test. If one punched at the device as hard as one could for 3 to 5 times, the device would come up with an accurate average of 1 strength score. Han Sen picked an empty room, pointed at the device, and said to Zero, "Hit it with all you got." Zero followed instructions as always, walked to the device, raised her tender fist, and hit the target hard. Han Sen quickly looked to the numbers, 97.0472, which was lower than what Han Sen had thought. He thought Zero's fitness should be over 100, while it was less than 100. Han Sen asked Zero to give it a few more shots, and the number was lower than the first one. The second shot showed 96.8964, and the rest were between the 2 numbers. It seemed Zero's strength was a bit lower than 100. However, that was still very impressive. Han Sen walked to the device himself and hit it hard. When he looked at the number, it kept go up and the stayed 70.0006, which made Han Sen quite pleased. This was his maximum estimate. He then made a few more punches and found that there was almost no variation between the numbers, with the largest difference being 0.0002. A fitness level of 70. What a great super body. The sacred bodies would be 30 plus at best.
Han Sen felt exhilarated.
With such a fitness, his cultivation would become much easier. Han Sen hesitated and summoned the Fairy Queen to shapeshift. Then he used Heresy Mantra and Overload to hit the target with all he got. Boom! With a huge sound, the number kept flipping up and ended at 81.6735, which made Han Sen overjoyed. Han Sen's number was not that far from Zero's. Although there was still a difference of a dozen points, Han Sen had already got the ability to fight her. Even if she suddenly went mad, Han Sen still could handle it to some extent. Furthermore, he had become an evolver, which meant not only his fitness was enhanced greatly, his potentials were also increased. He believed he could make Overload work even better. In addition, the third phase of Heresy Mantra, Longevity, was almost completed. If he could make progress in these 2 aspects, maybe Han Sen could approach Zero's level even without gaining any Geno points. Also, he could start to practice Hyper Geno arts on the Evolver's level. Thinking of the Hyper Geno arts that could change the structure of his body cells, Han Sen almost wanted to trade for one at the St. Hall immediately. Those kinds of Hyper Geno arts could increase his strength significantly. Evolvers who had practiced those Hyper Geno arts were significantly different from those who had not. Han Sen was very happy with this test result and became more familiar with his own fitness level, which would be very helpful in his future hunting endeavors. According to the investigation conducted by the Alliance, in Second God's Sanctuary, an ordinary creature had a physique between 0 to 20, a primitive creature had a physique between 20 to 50, a mutant creature had a physique between 50 to 80, while a sacred blood creature had a physique between 80 to 100 plus. Spirits had about the same level of physique as creatures, which meant an aristocrat spirit should have a strength between 50 to 80. Although the numbers could be off, it would not be too much off. The most unstable were the sacred blood creatures, since many were so strong that their strength was off the charts. Han Sen suspected that those might be super creatures of Second God's Sanctuary. With Han Sen's ability so far, he could totally fight a mutant creature or aristocrat spirit alone. Of course, it would be even better if he could practice a few hyper-geno arts designed for evolvers beforehand. In addition, he also had Zero, who was approaching 100 in her fitness, so Han Sen could totally wipe out the aristocrat spirit shelter. The restrictions in the growth of Su Yu's group was no big deal to Han Sen. However, Han Sen did not have enough time to do that. He took Zero back to his home, which was not the old house of his family, but a 3-bedroom penthouse Han Sen bought himself. Originally, he planned to use it with his girlfriend, but it turned out to be vacant. A few days back, Han Sen regretted that he had bought this penthouse. Currently, it became handy to accommodate Zero. Han Sen would not feel safe for Zero to live in the old house. Looking at the ragged clothes Zero was wearing, Han Sen felt he was being inhumane. The girl was following him anyway, so she deserved some decent clothing. Dressing like a refugee was a pity for such a beauty. Han Sen bought something to wear and a comlink for Zero on the Skynet and asked her to take a shower and change into the new clothes. Zero suddenly turned into a modern sweetheart and fashionista. "Can you stay here alone? Call me with comlink if you need anything." Han Sen taught her how to use the comlink and regarded her, fearing that she might insist on following him. He was about to report to Daphne, and she could not appear in the military. "Okay," Zero replied and nodded.
Han Sen suddenly felt reassured.
Eventually, he was able to accommodate this mysterious girl and get down to his own business. Han Sen taught Zero some more common sense and how to search information on the Skynet, asking her to search whatever she did not understand. Zero was indeed very smart. She almost understood everything after watching Han Sen do it, which made Han Sen feel more assured. This way, she will not create any trouble staying here. Does it count as keeping a mistress? Han Sen touched his chin and thought to himself. Considering that Zero looked only about 15 years old, not even an adult yet, Han Sen felt his thought was too evil. He shook his head and dismissed the thought. The next morning, Han Sen left to get certified as a sacred blood aristocrat, which was the last important matter he needed to tend to before serving. It was very crowded in the certification bureau. All the service windows had long lines in front of them, but the majority of the people were there for the certification as mutant evolvers and primitive evolvers. Although the mutant evolvers also had the status of aristocrat, their status was significantly lower than sacred blood aristocrats. Men were doing better and better in First God's Sanctuary, and more people were able to kill a super creature. However, those who could max out on sacred geno points were still quite limited. Seeing how crowded it was, Han Sen joined a shorter line and waited there. The line was moving rather slow, and there was nothing Han Sen could do other than keep waiting. Because some tests must be run, there was no way for him to apply online. Han Sen had to come in person and wait. "Brother, you are so young to become an evolver. You must be less than 23? Someone in front of Han Sen, who looked around 30 years old, was quite talkative and started to chat with Han Sen, seeing that the line was not moving. Almost.
Han Sen smiled.
In fact, he had not even had his 21st birthday yet. "You must have maxed out on your primitive geno points already?" The guy asked again. "My primitive geno points are maxed out, yes?"
Han Sen nodded.
The young people nowadays are so great, maxing out on primitive geno points at such a young age. Back when we started, there were very few master fighters. Every time we killed a primitive creature, we had to work together, and a few of us would always get hurt. The guy felt nostalgic. "Brother, You must have maxed out on mutant geno points? Han Sen quickly asked. The guy straightened up his back and said contently, after so many years, I have eventually maxed out. Brother, you should stay there for a few years more. There is a huge difference between maxing out on mutant geno points and primitive geno points. The status of mutant aristocrat could make your life much easier. A lot of people near them started to cast envious glance at the guy. Maxing out on mutant geno points and becoming an evolver around 30 years old was something heavenly for ordinary people. After all, for modern humans, 30 years old was just a beginning, with a bright future ahead. For mutant evolvers, 30 years old was young. There were many patient people who would wait to max out mutant geno points when they were 40 or 50 years old. Since evolvers had a lifespan of 300 years old, it was okay for someone to become a mutant evolver when they were 50 or 60. Of course, there were many young people who could not wait, and many of them would choose to evolve with just primitive geno points maxed out. People had different strategies and plans about life, and there was no right or wrong about it. What is to brag about? Isn't it shameful to evolve on mutant geno points when you're already 30 years old? If I were you, I would not even show face in public for the shame, snorted a young man waiting in line, annoyed at the guy's words. The guy suddenly flushed and exclaimed madly, What's wrong with 30 years old? I am a mutant evolver after all, which is much better than a primitive evolver like you. Who told you I'm a primitive evolver? You think everyone is as dumb as you and evolve so late? Have you ever seen a 20-year-old guy who had already maxed out on mutant geno points? I am a decade faster than you are, said the young man with his nose in the air. The guy suddenly became silent, his face flushed and fists clenched. However, he felt powerless to argue. Other evolvers in line all felt envious about the young man, hearing he had already maxed out on his mutant geno points. A few girls even started to wink at him. A mutant evolver as young as 20 years old had a bright future ahead of him. Successful men like this were very popular among girls. Friend, you can't put it that way. If there were no previous generations that had fought and learned about the creatures in God's sanctuary, if it were not for the meat and beast souls that they brought back, how would we have meat to eat, beast souls to depend on and experience to learn from? And how could you have maxed out on mutant geno points so soon? We are only making these achievements on the shoulders of them. You don't have to be grateful, but you can't disrespect them, Han Sen couldn't help saying. Thanks to the previous generations, humans were able to make today's achievements. The earlier people entered God's sanctuary, the more they had suffered. People in first God's sanctuary these days were already very blessed. Brother, well said, said the guy. The older people all felt touched by Han Sen's words. 2 or 3 decades ago, the environment of first God's sanctuary was much worse than it was at this point. At that time, not to mention sacred blood creatures, people would even need to take tremendous risks when hunting mutant creatures. Circumstances had been much different. As long as one was patient, it would be easy for someone to max out on mutant geno points at 30 to 40 years old. The weak or the weak. Cut the crap. What's the point of acting nice when you are just a primitive evolver? The young man gave Han Sen a stare and said, disdained, No matter strong or weak, you must have basic politeness. Otherwise, what's the difference between you and those creatures?
Han Sen sighed quietly.
The young man's expression changed. He felt embarrassed and said with his eyes fixed on Han Sen, Scums always have all the excuses in the world. If you're capable, we should argue this out with fists. If you can beat me, you can say whatever you want. Otherwise, shut up. Han Sen shrugged and said nothing. He had been through so much that he was no longer interested in such meaningless argument. Not interested in wasting a single minute on this young man. Han Sen would never fight him physically. Seeing that Han Sen had not responded, the young man felt Han Sen must be scared of himself. He made some sarcastic remarks, and Han Sen ignored them. The guy could not stand watching any longer and wanted to argue with the young men. However, Han Sen pulled him aside and said, Brother, it is almost your turn. Just focus on the business and did not get serious with a kid. Scums are full of excuses, the young man said sourly. Han Sen did not pay him any mind. People like this young man only dared to be so arrogant in the alliance, was put on the gladiator, he would definitely have some punching coming. If he acted this way in the god's sanctuary, he would probably have died already. The young man seemed to feel uncomfortable under such public attention and did not say anything more. Everyone went back to waiting. After a long while, the guy in front of Han Sen had finished his certification as a mutant evolver, and it was Han Sen's turn. It so happened that the young man in the line next to them had also come to the window. He walked up, raised his voice on, and said to the staff, "I am here to be certified as a mutant evolver." After that, the young man glanced at Han Sen provocatively, as if he were saying, "I am a mutant evolver, and what are you?" Han Sen did not even bother to say anything. He simply walked to the window, handed in his identification card, and whispered to the staff, "Would you please handle my request to be certified as a sacred blood evolver?" Although Han Sen's voice was low, the young man quickly changed his expression. People around them also looked to Han Sen in surprise. The staff member who had been working long hours also raised his eyes and checked Han Sen out. Seeing Han Sen was so young, the staff member repeated incredulously, "Are you applying to be certified as a sacred blood evolver?" A sacred blood evolver was still quite rare at this point. On a small planet such as Raqqa, 3 to 5 sacred blood evolvers per year would be considered a significant number already. In addition, Han Sen was way too young. He seemed to be around 20 or even younger, so it was hard for anyone to believe he was a sacred blood evolver. Yes.
Han Sen nodded.
The staff member quickly retrieved Han Sen's identification card. After scanning it, the AI showed Han Sen's information. The staff member gasped and said, 20 years old, graduate of Blackhawk Military Academy, and a major. As he said that, the young man and others were in doubt looked at Han Sen in a much different way. Blackhawk Military Academy was a top school in the eyes of ordinary people. A graduate of Blackhawk was undoubtedly the elite among the elite, and those who could graduate with the rank of major were so few that they could be called the dragon of a man. People like this were beyond the level of ordinary people, with a wide gap in between. The face of the young man turned purple. He wished he could hide in a hole somewhere. Everyone else looked at Han Sen with admiration, and girls and women even started to wink at Han Sen. A sacred blood aristocrat of such a young age, an elite who graduated from the top school, and on top of that, a good-looking guy with skin so smooth that all women coveted. Even the widows were swallowing. Major this way. We need to do a procedural test. The staff member called Han Sen by his rank directly with a lot of respect. Han Sen entered the testing device under everyone's watch. All the items were quite regular. As long as he could reach the minimum of a sacred blood evolver, he could finish the certification. That was of course not difficult for Han Sen at all. He even needed to control his power intentionally to keep his numbers under 30, otherwise it would be too abnormal. After Han Sen finished the test, everyone else was watching him as if he were a star. Many people were filled with admiration, while the young man had left secretly at some point. This is the true elite of the Alliance. A sacred blood aristocrat of 20 years old. So handsome. I wonder if he has a girlfriend. I wish to marry him. I don't mind if I only have one night with him. I wonder how much it would cost to sleep with him for a night. A few days later, in a spaceship, Han Sen was reading materials of ancient languages using his comlink. He should report to Daphne, but the location for reporting was in a remote galaxy called Dongyin. It was already the periphery of the Alliance. If people went beyond Dongyin, there was no Shura, but many undeveloped galaxies. Han Sen did not know what Daphne's mission was to be located so far away. However, Han Sen had smelled trouble. If the warships were serving in some special regions, the traffic would become an obstacle for him to return home. Many people serving special missions would not even return home once during the entire service. Although Han Sen did not care where he served, he would feel terrible about not being able to see his mother and sister for several years. However, there was nothing for him to do at this point. He had to report. Because Galaxy Dongyin was located on the border of the Alliance, which was very far away, it would take him a long time to arrive there. Han Sen was sore in his eyes after reading the ancient language for a long time and got up to the holographic hull of the spaceship, ready to move around on the Gladiator platform. It had been a long time since he last logged in Gladiator. Han Sen first checked his friend list, wishing to see Queen there. He had improved significantly in fitness, so maybe he would last longer with her. Unfortunately, Queen's name was grayed out. His only friend online was QHC. Han Sen used to be very interested in fighting QHC, but he started to feel bored at this point. The fitness level of QHC was around 40. Even if he had grown as well, it was hard for him to reach Han Sen's level. Beating QHC would mean nothing to Han Sen, because they were not similar in strength anymore. In front of the absolute strength, techniques could make very little difference. It was like however good the sniper was, he could not resist an atomic bomb. When Han Sen was ready to close the friend list and request a random match, QHC sent him an invite. Han Sen hesitated and clicked yes. Some time ago, QHC did not refuse Han Sen because he was too weak and practiced with him for a long time. So Han Sen felt he should return the favor. Chen Hejin was talking to a middle-aged man at this point. The man was named Lu Bin, a prominent figure in Ares Martial Hall and even the entire martial hall industry. Although Lu Bin was just an evolver, he had great talent in leg skills. Killer kicks invented by him was masterful and had been designated as one of the routine skills in the Alliance military. The reason the leg skills were impressive was that Lu Bin himself was a veteran who had been through a lot of combats against Shura and suffered numerous injuries. The killer kicks was a set of leg skills refined in blood and fire. It was not just great skills, but also experience gained from risking one's life. Because Lu Bin did not have a good background, he only evolved with mutant geno points maxed out. Until he retired, he was only a colonel. However, his honor and glory had earned him great reputation among many veterans who gave him both thumbs up not only for his leg skills, but also for his bravery. After retiring, Lu Bin was hired by Ares Martial Hall as an instructor to teach leg skills, since killer kicks was one of the top leg skills for unevolved persons. However, because most students had never been through life and death situations like Lu Bin, it was very hard for them to understand the essence of killer kicks. Even Chen Hejin, who was very talented and instructed by Lu Bin personally, was not able to grasp what killer kicks truly meant. The skills were meant to kill in a war, so it could only be practiced at life and death moments. Since Chen Hejin had not experienced that, it was not easy for him to have the epiphany. Seeing Han Sen logging in the platform, Chen Hejin, who was a bit depressed that he did not get the skills right, suggested a break to Lu Bin. With Lu Bin's consent, Chen Hejin invited Han Sen to fight. Lu Bin was watching on the stands. Initially, he did not really want to teach someone like Chen Hejin. Chen Hejin was so well protected that killer kicks was not the right skills for him. Killer kicks was more designed for a veteran on the battlefield, with many daring moves that put the user's life at stake. It was something only the battlefield could produce. The brave one always wins the fight. On the battlefield, even hesitation of a millisecond could get one killed. Cowardice and hesitation meant death. Therefore, the essence of killer kicks was only one word, which was bravery. The bravery that made one kill enemies fearlessly while putting one's own life at stake. Chen Hejin did not acquire the essence of killer kicks, so he was still using the hyper-geno arts that he was used to when fighting Han Sen. Han Sen controlled his strength at the same level as Chen Hejin, but he still felt awkward when fighting the guy. It was not because Han Sen had lowered his power. With Han Sen's ability to control his own body, he could use his strength well no matter which level his strength was. However, fighting Chen Hejin like this made Han Sen feel awkward. Although he had lowered his fitness level, Han Sen still had his judgment. In Han Sen's eyes, Chen Hejin had too many weaknesses, which made Han Sen lose the desire to win. Even if he lowered his strengths, Han Sen could still see too many opportunities to beat his opponent. It was simply too easy to win. Han Sen could not reduce his judgment, so a fight like this made him feel bored. Han Sen did not hesitate to end the fight immediately. Initially, Chen Hejin wanted to relax himself by fighting Han Sen, but his fight against Han Sen was surprisingly depressing. In other words, Han Sen was giving him too much pressure. Although Han Sen had always been strong, he was never able to bring such pressure to the room, which made Chen Hejin feel alarmed. The next moment, however, Han Sen quickly moved his fists around, punching at Chen Hejin as fast as lightning bolts. It turned out Chen Hejin was not even able to dodge the attacks but had to block them. Although Han Sen had reduced his strength, the fists were still carrying endless fierceness, hitting at Chen Hejin. From the first punch to the last, Han Sen directly eliminated Qian Hajin, who was not even able to return one punch in between. Qian Hajin was forced to the corner from the middle of the stage, and then a storm of fists made his body explode, costing his virtual life. Qian Hajin was dumbstruck for a while, unable to believe he had lost the fight like this. When he used to fight Han Sen, he had almost never lost. But after this short period of time, he was beaten easily by Han. Senator Qian Hajin could not accept such result and was ready to invite Han Sen again. However, Lu Bin stopped him and said, "No need to continue. You are not his match." Qian Hajin was not persuaded. As he was about to argue, Lu Bin continued to say, "His fitness was too much greater than yours. Haven't you noticed that he had intentionally suppressed his strength to fight you? That is impossible." Qian Hajin suddenly paused. Reflecting on what had happened just now, he felt like what Lu Bin said did make sense. Otherwise, he would not have that kind of pressure. "I'll show you." Lu Bin did not explain anymore, but sent Han Sen an invite. In fact, after watching the fight between Han Sen and Qian Hajin, Lu Bin felt an urge to fight. He was a veteran who had survived 1,000 deaths, so he had very sharp senses. The only did he see that Han Sen was suppressing his own strength, he also saw that Han Sen was not an ordinary person. All his skills must have been practiced between life and death. For someone like him who had seen so many deaths in his life, he was not even able to tell Han Sen's murderous intent when the two young men were fighting, which was shocking to him. In order to kill someone, you must be determined. With that kind of determination, the murderous intent would be natural. If you tried to hide your intention to kill, your determination must be hindered. And if you did not have the determination, your moves would not be as swift. However, Han Sen's moves weirdly combined the self-contradicting elements perfectly together. Although he was very swift, he did not leak any intention to kill. That kind of ability was impressive. Even Lu Bin, who had been through 1,000,000 fights, had only seen that kind quality in two persons. One of the two was himself, and the other was a Shura fighter who was black-horned. Although the Shura was only a black-horned fighter, that was the worst fight Lu Bin had ever been through. In the end, although Lu Bin was able to survive, he suffered too bad an injury to keep serving, which was why he left his favorite place, the military. Suddenly seeing someone else with the same kind of ability, Lu Bin was reminded of the bloody fight and felt an itch. Invited by a stranger, Han Sen did not think that much. Since he would have chosen random match anyway, he simply accepted the invite. Han Sen entered the Colosseum, looked to the opposite direction, and saw his opponent smiling at him. Han Sen couldn't help feeling nervous, because he also smelled someone like himself. Seeing Lu Bin enter to fight himself, his friends and students were all quite surprised. Many people chose to observe the fight, and the stands were soon filled. Although Lu Bin would log in Gladiator from time to time, he seldom fought. Most of the time, he was just instructing his students. It was not because Lu Bin felt he was invincible, but because the simulated fights could not give him enough thrill. That was why Lu Bin was not at all interested in fights like this. In reality, however, he was even less likely to use killer kicks. Therefore, Lu Bin's students rarely saw him in the fight. Many of his old comrades had not seen him using his best skills in a long while. Who was so good that even Lu went up himself? Wang Daqing was surprised to see Lu Bin in the fight himself.
No idea.
His opponent was using the face blur function, so we can't tell who he is. But I bet he is quite somebody, otherwise Captain Lu Bin would not go up himself, another person said in surprise as well. Haven't seen killer kicks in so long. I wonder if I had the luck to see it today. You know how Lu is. Since he is in a fight, he will do his best. Then we should all thank this soldier on warship. I hope he lasts longer so that we could enjoy the fight better. I will bet $1,000 to say the guy would not last 7 kicks. You give him too much credit. I'll bet you 20,000 for 4 kicks. 1,500. Count me. I will bet 2,000 as well. *T. No way you're doing this. Everyone is betting on Lu Bin. There is no way this will work. Lu Bin's friends were all quite excited, and his students were more curious. It was a fresh experience for them to see Lu Bin using killer kicks. Only Qian Hajin was looking at Han Sen with a complex expression. No one knew what he was thinking. Friend, which troop were you at? Before the fight started, Lu Bin did not rush to begin, but smiled and asked. He thought Han Sen should also be a veteran, otherwise it was unlikely he would have this kind of ability. In fact, that was why Lu Bin felt close to Han Sen in the first place. Military secret, Han Sen said calmly. He was not being arrogant, but it was really a military secret. At least that was what it said on his assignment paper. He also signed a non-disclosure agreement. If Han Sen told anyone about it, he would be sent to a military court. Leaking military secrets could be a misdemeanor or a felony. Han Sen did not want to have any offense in this regard. Hearing Han Sen's words, Lu Bin smiled and said, "Do not show any mercy later." Of course, Han Sen nodded and said, "Then let's begin." Lu Bin suddenly became very calm and made a side kick as sharp as a blade at Han's senator. He was so fast and fierce that it was nerve-wracking. The scarier part was that the kick was so sudden that no one saw it coming. That's what killer kicks looked like. Many students who had been instructed by Lu Bin could not help but doubt whether they had learned the skills correctly after watching Lu Bin do it. They could not reach Lu Bin's level at all. When they made the kicks themselves, it was not as sudden or fierce. Lu is serious this time. "I don't believe the boy could even take this one kick," Wang Daqing said with his eyes wide. He did not realize that Lu Bin would be so serious, as if he was treating his opponent as a shura in the battlefield. Boom! After Wang Daqing said that, a soldier on warship suddenly raised his arm to block Lu Bin's kick. Although he took 2 steps back, he only lost 2 points in health. Quite an opponent. He was able to block Lu Bin's kick in time. I wonder who he is. Lu Bin's comrades all felt unexpected. However, no one could answer this question. Even Chen Hezhen did not know a soldier on warship was. Lu Bin suddenly looked exhilarated, as if the blood in his body was brought to a boil. He roared and kicked at Han Sen repeatedly, every kick faster and fiercer than the last. Lu Bin's leg skills were not flamboyant, but every kick he made was life-threatening, with no additional moves. Many moves he made were practical yet unexpected, which was very inspiring. Han Sen was forced back by the kicks and had to take defensive positions with his arms and legs moving. Although he was able to block Lu Bin's attacks, he was at an absolute disadvantage, like a small boat in surging waves, likely to sink any time. This is the true killer kicks. So fierce. Coach Lu is absolutely amazing. What kicks? 5 kicks in a row. So strong. How did he achieve that leg whipping? The angle was simply impossible. Captain Lu did not forget any of his kung fu. Every move is a killer move. This is the leg skills of a true man. I've decided. I will sign up to learn this after I go back. The audience were all dazed by Lu Bin's moves. They wished they were Lu Bin himself to make those kicks. However, the true evolver masters among them couldn't help frowning. The leg skills of Lu Bin were indeed very impressive to the point that it was shocking. Even if they were competing against Lu Bin themselves, they did not dare to say they could block his life-threatening attacks for sure. However, his opponent was able to block all Lu Bin's attacks, though in an awkward way. Until this very point, Lu Bin was not able to break his defense. The points his opponent lost in health were mostly the automatic defense loss generated by the system, which were merely 1 to 2 points each time. Who is Lu Bin's opponent? He is able to take so many kicks from Lu Bin. Those who knew Lu Bin well started to become dumbstruck. They knew everything about Lu Bin's leg skills, which were the skills to kill enemies in battles. Most of the time, the 2 persons at the fight had to fight with life when Lu Bin used the skills. If the opponent was able to beat Lu Bin, his friends would not be as surprised. However, the fact that the opponent was capable of blocking so many kicks was quite alarming. Han Sen also felt very excited. He did not expect the stranger who sent him an invite was an expert killer with excellent leg skills. Even Han Sen felt it was hard to predict Lu Bin's kicks in the beginning, which was why he was having a hard time defending himself.